you agree? Okay, first of all, I'd just like to thank you all for coming out this evening. And especially, I'd like to welcome Bridget Farron, the publisher from Bullaun Press. And welcome you for the Limerick launch of I Am Lewy by Eoghan Ó Tuairisc, and translated into English by poet and author Mícheál Ó. My name is Dominic Taylor, Director of the Limerick Writers' Centre, and we're delighted to partner with Quay Books and Bullaun Press for this unique launch event. Bullaun Press and Mícheál Ó are to be congratulated for making this work available in translation from the original Irish. We can now access another important part of our Irish literary culture, which has been neglected for so long. Indeed, Mícheál has translated other forgotten works from the Irish, such as Exiles by Mike MacDomhnaill and This Road of Mine by Joseph McGreena. I'm delighted also to welcome bilingual author and poet Mike MacDomhnaill as our guest speaker tonight, and to officially launch I Am Lewy. So I'm going to, without further ado, invite Mike to the podium to say a few words. Thank you.
Bullaun Dominic Fain of all the more Limnochtán Screenoril Contostig La Fadan Lanish Limerick Writers' Centre and the Revival Press. Is that thing okay? No. So, and he's been very helpful to me, so I'd acknowledge that. And when Mícheál Ó, who I'd never met till tonight, invited me to do this launch, well, obviously I was very honoured, but I said, I wonder what's going on here. And so I just checked things out, and as Dominic has already fall to Remish, Bridget Farrell of the Bullaun Press, and I think it's a very, again, before I get on to the core of what we're here tonight about, Bullaun Press, anybody who establishes a press at the moment, trying to publish books, print them and sell them, it's pretty much a work of love. You're not going to make much money out of it. Maybe if you've got your hand on normal people, that's gone. So, but any books are hard to sell, and I think any of us who are in that trade realise one of the shocking things I saw recently was one particular publisher said, unless you're very well known on social media, don't come near us. And so, I mean, you could be, as I was joking to someone earlier, be after writing Finnegan's Wake and or whatever, and unless you're good on social media, book isn't going to sell, so move on. But anyway, so focus to Bridget on Bullaun Press, agus tá Sulgum Ganaroid go Galliv. Just find Lower Hain, nor a force and Lower O Mícheál, to look through it and read it, obviously. I said to do it full justice, I should get the original copy, and I hadn't read Eoghan Ó Tuairisc on Lomnochtán. And a strange enough word, actually. Lomnocht means bare or naked, Lomnochtán, but it's not a dirty book. It's just a book, a 6-year-old. It's just. It might sell better, actually, if I would pretend otherwise. But I Am Lewy is a much more innocent title, as Berla, and I think probably I Am Lewy is a better title, not trying to second guess Eoghan Ó Tuairisc. And again, for those of you who don't know Eoghan Ó Tuairisc, for Tashamaravo Nedig Octo Don 3, Scription Lorshin Nedig Shakta Shakta. It wasn't too widely read, I don't think, at the time, in fairness. I think Ó Tuairisc was one of these slightly neglected artists. He wasn't from the Gaelic, he didn't write Gaelic Irish and didn't try. And in this book, particularly, there's English and Irish interspersed. And that was the big challenge, I'd imagine, for Mícheál when he was taking it on, because some of it, the little phrases come in English. Like one that I just, at the very start with it, in the Gaelic, he says, Laurian, this is Lewy now, Laurian Lewy English, ni more dum dolly dahlia. So, Ó Tuairisc was trying to get into the head of a 6-year-old himself, obviously, it's pretty autobiographical. And he says, I must get into the habit of this English, because he's speaking English and I'm writing in Irish, and that's kind of a thread that runs through it. And Mícheál took that on, obviously. So, just to talk about the two books really now, because I have both. The great thing about being an Irish, lucky enough if you're an Irish speaker or understand the Gaelic, obviously better, you have two things now. You have I Am Lewy, which might lead you back to the Gaelic, Monowill and Gaelic, no matter bevan in Deruja, but you could do as I did. I read maybe a couple of chapters of Mícheál's, then I'd read the one on Gaelic, then I try to better him. I'd say, read that now as Gaelic and see what would my translation be compared to Mícheál's. And it was a very entertaining exercise for me. So I suppose if you have nothing else to do, and that's only a joke because we're talking about literature here. And when Ó Tuairisc put that together, if it was neglected, it didn't deserve to be. To be in that same realm as Proust in the French and Joyce, we all love to talk about Joyce, but he wasn't the only one who could kind of get back into the mind of a child and write broken English, broken sentences, in this case broken English and broken Irish. I'd say one thing that I enjoyed when I was checking it out was that Anne Lucy in the Irish Examiner, she said it was reminiscent of a Bob Dylan lyric. So those who are into Bob Dylan, and I like Dylan myself, it's a bit like that. Different things are thrown at you, and if you don't just get too hung up about it, you'll enjoy it. It gives you a feel of life in the 1920s, through the eyes of a 6-year-old, so it's not political, but the Republicans and the Free Staters, neither side comes out very good at it, because his family is just trying to survive. And one of the saddest things is minding this car. The father had been in the First World War and got a small bit of a pension because he got his hand was injured, and he said, I think it was his left hand, he said he regretted it wasn't his right hand because he'd have got more money. But he got something per week, and he was able to keep a car, a bit of a Banjax car, I presume. And that meant he was driving people around, made a few quid. His wife, as in Louis's mother, is a seamstress, working day and night, just trying to keep the rent paid. So you get the feeling right through the book, I Am Lewy, and I'll concentrate on that now, but I may not say it's an excellent translation. But it gives you the feel of what it was like to be poor in that time, without quite going into Angela's Ashes territory. This guy, they're struggling away, but they're doing reasonably okay. Obviously I won't give away the ending. It isn't if it's a novel where you don't, if you know the ending, it doesn't really make any difference, you're going to enjoy it anyway, but you can kind of guess that the card doesn't come to a good end. And when the Republicans, that's a funny thing as well through the book, when the young lad is picking up new words, the word commandeer becomes a big word in the family, and he kind of has spelled K-O-M something I-N-D, what's this word commandeer, but he realises it's not a very good word. Something bad is going to happen, and something bad unfortunately does happen. So, like I say, from both sides, the Free Staters are kind of looked down on, and the Republicans are looked down on. This family is just trying to get on. So that would be, I suppose, just looking through a few things I had written down here. I'm not going to go reading a few, but just to give myself my ideas as I was going through it. I would like to, I suppose, at this stage, just to quickly, obviously, if I kind of ignored Mícheál himself at the moment. Mícheál Ó, who has published quite a number of books, and he's here in UL. And I'd just like to congratulate Mícheál, not just on this book, but on his previous works as well. I know he has a particular interest in the travellers, and one book that stood out, and I haven't read it, I don't like to pretend I've done something if I haven't done it, but on Johnny Dornan. I know I've heard of Johnny Dornan, and I think, was it Felix Dornan as well, his brother? Yeah. And I just remember,
Pipers?
Eoghan Ó Tuairisc used to play him regularly, Pipers, yeah. Travellers, and Mícheál has done work on Johnny Dornan. I think The Post-Colonial Artist is the kind of the subtitle there. So can't wait to get my hands on that. So it has made me hungry for new stuff, and I don't think it to be quite personal about it, but I love about it at night like tonight, and meeting people like Mícheál that I hadn't met before. It's great to mix with people who are like they never routine, but it can be a pretty small world, as we know. But I think we give each other encouragement by coming together a night like tonight, apart from book launch. It's good just to hold the kid. So, Mahon Farm Mícheál. Just move along then. In my early years as a teacher, Ó Tuairisc himself, I met him once, and I found him to be a very generous man, because I was teaching maths at the time, but I was one of these innocent young teachers who took on a drama for kids in school. And I hadn't a clue about drama, to be quite honest. I still don't have. I like drama, but I wouldn't have been much at putting it on. But I had a group of 50s, and we put on a play, and it was actually on Travellers, funny enough, coincidentally, the work Mícheál had done. And God, I left the kids up on the stage, and it was only when I saw it enacting in front of me, the sweat began going down. This isn't going well. And I noticed there was a multi-tour there. The judge was Eoghan Ó Tuairisc, as it turned out. This guy was sitting on the cold hall with a big woolly hat, I remember. And he was writing furiously. And I said, no, I probably had to meet him at the end. I forget how it worked out, but he had a nice chat with me and basically had loads of suggestions. And he left us through to the next round. No, we didn't do too badly, I think. We didn't win it, but damn it, we did pretty good. And I learned a lot from Eoghan, and I learned a lot. He was just, from that brief meeting I found, he was a very generous man, who knew we were winging it pretty much. And in fairness, the kids put in great work to it. I met the odd one since, and they still enjoy looking back in that time. It was back 40 years ago now. But it was good fun, and that was my one meeting with Eoghan Ó Tuairisc. So, like I say, I'm not here to delay you, but to show you my enjoyment of the book and my enjoyment of Ó Tuairisc. So, Mícheál, you killed two birds with the one stone, as far as I'm concerned. I was familiar with Ó Tuairisc's poetry, some of it, no, not all of it. I had met up with some of it, obviously, along the way. But this and his lifestyle and his life was a hard enough life. He was on the margins, I suppose, deliberately so. He was writing in Irish, he wrote certain ones in English. I mean, some of his, beginning of just jotting down here, something you may have heard of L'Attack, that was based on the 1798 when the French came over. That would have got a fair bit of notice at the time, all right. That was brought out in 1962, we were going back. And he had another one which was on the weekend of Dermot and Grace. Now, those who are familiar with the Gaeilge, like you'll have heard of Dermot of Grania. So that was his take on that. Now, I haven't read it, but he had stuff like that that wasn't quite, you can imagine, fitting into maybe what some people wanted the Irish writer to write. And I saw firsthand, and I'm sorry enough for always going back to Michael Hartnett, and from the same town as Hartnett, and I love talking about it. But Hartnett, when he switched to his Scriabh Scaling, full she and such cool na láimhe mar sin comma ní raibh Gaeling na Gaeltachta ag Michael Hartnett. But why should he have it? If you were reared in a working class area, you wouldn't come sent off to the Gaeltacht for your holidays, and unless you were lucky enough to be born then in doing Queen or Carroll or Peoid. Can I have Camioc Gaeling going Queen, but one will to talk less, one will say good. And that is why, this Eoghan Ó Tuairisc was kind of claiming this, might say, Gaeltacht Irish, but so what? This is what I am, this is me, this is what I'm writing about. So that, I just enjoyed all that, enjoyed coming to terms with that myself even, because I would have been one of the lucky ones who got to the Gaeltacht when I was about 19. And yes, it's lovely to get to the Gaeltacht. It's small, and it's got smaller probably, but at the same time I've always felt like that the person in Newcastle West, the person in Mícheál Ó, the person in wherever, shouldn't have to be depending on either Connemara or either Corcoguine. Colga Medish sauce the Snodden Willid, and Gaeling at our cook allowed. I'd like to do one bit for you now, lads. It's only a couple of sentences, I promise. After Bilingual Bailey, when I was reading this particular part, I was marked out here, I said to myself, hold me Hall, take this on. But I'd never seen this sentence before. I'll just read it first. And again to give the idea of the original Gaeilge that we had to challenge on. I'm reading this now as it is, so there's English and Irish coming in. My Lord Bishop, the people will rise in their thousands against spelt like a Chinaman. In a Golofin grey, na míltach a loud train of Tlocka. I am. And again, this part of the whole thing in the book, like who he is, I am Lewy, that's why Mícheál called it that name. He's kind of discovering himself. Lorna Sucre down there, burying the grandfather. And the DJ here is the District Justice, in case any younger people have been disco. This is back in 1922, like or whatever. So the DJ, the District Justice. And before I read the next sentence, it struck me at the time how they were friendly with the District Justice, was probably through the car, because they'd have been driving the District Justice to court cases or whatever, and he seems to become friendly with the family. And he provided the young lad with some books as well, and I just mentioned one of those as well now before I should. But anyway, this last sentence says, Dog and DJ Bullaun Lewy, daffodils. Again, no daffodils in English, not Lusa Crimclean. Vishe de Corsolish. Now I stopped and read that. Vishe de Corsolish, there's daffodils that are out at the moment. How will Mícheál do that? And I just read Mícheál's version there now. The people will rise in their thousands, asleep beneath the earth, thousands and thousands of them, talking through the stones. I am. Full stop there. Funeral day. The DJ left flowers on the grave, daffodils. They gave off light. Now, it might seem simple to read it there, but I said I liked... my tongue to get from my own back. but you might say, how would you translate something? And they gave off light seems simple when you read it now, but if you had been faced with translating yourself at the start, we should have cut Sullish. But it's a lovely phrase in Irish, and fair play to Mícheál and Béla Cutter. So, listen, I could go on and on, obviously. One last thing I'd like to say, again, the disillusionment at the time. They were evicted from this house, and guess who the landlord was? Well, all the talk at the moment about evictions will come back in tomorrow. But gach skilling sa tak tresh and kiesa iak. That means in English, every shilling in the house left after paying the rent to Nicholas Murphy, vote number 1 TD. So their landlord was Nicholas Murphy, vote number 1 TD, and he does evict him, I'm afraid. Anyway, listen lads, Gurmila Manga was Eastchit. Like I said, just feel a farewell. I think I got to say most of what I wanted to say. And but while I'm fault no, well, it's Dr. Dominic Tuairisc and Nish Conan Lower Fain a Choros will go and Con Mícheál Fain Colin Yondi.
Thank you very much.
Margaret Dominic agus Mike Buíochas ó Chríoh gachéine tháinig Machnach agus Siobhan Anna Croga agus Anna Eilish agus go thar Eilish an Marsha Titchin. Agus le Pat Arnoy as up you know, an ócáidir fada agrú agus mar sinja agus fáilte chóróin. I'd really like to thank Mike there as well, and Pat and Dominic, and you know, for like it was obvious Mike put an awful lot of work into just in, like I've been at very few book launches where somebody has put that amount of effort into actually preparing to know about the author and actually reading into his background, etc. And I suppose Eoghan Ó Tuairisc was a bit of a mystery man, really, in ways, because he was very quiet, as Mike said there earlier. And my father actually said the same thing. He met him once ever in Galway, and he said he was a very unassuming, kind of humble person, you know. And in a way, that was one of the main kind of sides of it, and apart from the fact that he was from Galway and had Galway Irish. That was one of the main reasons why I wanted to translate him, to be honest, was number one, I just, no, he wasn't from Bunmurray, no. He was actually from Ballinasloe, he wasn't from the Gaeltacht, and as Mike said there, like he was actually from a mixed background. Like his father fought in the British Army, like a lot of the characters in the book are based on his own family, I suppose, and what he saw when he was growing up, when he was young. And he obviously had a very good memory. He also taught in a lot of quite poor areas in Dublin at the time. He dedicated the book, actually that book, to a couple of lads who were travellers, wards, you know, who I suspect were from the West originally as well. And he said something about, you know, they were the most loyal. In other words, they turned up the most at school, you know, in national school. But I think a lot of the language he got and how he got into a child's head so well, it's the best book I've ever read as regards somebody being able to get into a child's mind at the time, you know. I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that he was teaching children his whole life, you know, and also that he came to the Irish language new himself, you know, and probably had all the sort of stereotypes and preconceptions about it as anybody else would, you know, that it was difficult and all the rest of it. But really his aim in life was to kind of put the Irish language back and to reassume its place amongst the modern languages in Europe, you know what I mean? I mean, Irish is the first vernacular in Europe, like, you know, first written vernacular. A lot of people forget about that, you know, and it's a big irony actually that our history, a lot of it is, you know, that we've kind of, it was associated with poverty, I suppose, and to just go back to what that man was saying earlier, it's associated with poverty, with ignorance, with the English language, the language of commerce, economics. If you're going to America, you need to have English, etc. You still need English, no matter where you're coming from nowadays. That hasn't changed. But it's actually a miracle that it survived, to be honest with you. You know, a lot of other languages would have died out, considering the history of the language. You know, But he could see that there was a very rich culture in the Irish language, and he wanted to put that back into, to get it to assume its place, I suppose. And it's kind of a nice coincidence, but it's 40 years literally since Eoghan Ó Tuairisc, or Eugene Waters' death, and Bridget, like the first book that, she's a new publisher, first one in Ireland really that I've seen that wants to create a kind of a press that will translate other languages, into Irish, into English, and Spanish, and vice versa, etc. And her next book is going to be in German shortly, in a few weeks' time. Translated from the German, and the next one after that is going to be from Ukrainian. So that's a huge development, and actually I'm really proud that the first language that her press produced, very far-seeing kind of publisher, and set it up during COVID, which isn't easy at all. The very first one she chose was actually a totally hidden classic, really, from the Irish language. So fair play to you, Bridget. If people get anything from the book, it's number one is there was people from he was from a mixed background, right? His mother was actually belonged to a very small Protestant sect called the Plymouth Brethren, who were persecuted in England, etc. Some of them came to Ireland, Northern Ireland, and that. His father was Irish, quite Republican in his views, but actually had fought in the British Army, like half the families in Ireland at the time. Got badly disabled over there, comes home. He's trying to drive a taxi which is falling apart. They don't have the money to get a new car. Mother's awake at night working away sewing, trying to make extra money. She was actually a part-time fortune teller as well, or clairvoyant, anything to make money. And her name was Sproul, I think was her name. Sproul. And he was Waters, Watters. But what's interesting about it is, before anybody would even go near that question, in fact we're only looking at it now 100 years later, what does it mean to be Irish? Like, we're a mixture of a lot of different backgrounds. There's hardly any family in the country that doesn't have English surnames in their names. Do you know what I mean? So at some stage, you back along the line. And so we're a mixture of people, we're a mixture of cultures. It's actually, it's a very rich way to be, if you're a mixture of, that you know different languages like he did. He was really good at French, he was Latin, he got a scholarship to university because the family couldn't afford for him to go to college. He studied late at night and became a teacher, etc. We're only discussing now 100 years later is to try and create an identity where we can accept everybody in Ireland, in the north, nationalist and unionist, etc., and to try and create a language around that. He was discussing these really tricky questions, even through a child's eyes back then, where he's trying to work out, the child is, well, Dad is trying to stay friendly with the local district justice who's British. He's trying to stay friendly with the Protestants. He's trying to stay friendly with the Republicans. He's trying to stay friendly with the Free Staters. Why? Because he's an ordinary person in the middle of a war, and he's just trying to get by with his family. Do you know what I mean? And that's it. Like, as simple as that. And I suppose, in a way, in a strange way, it has a kind of a reflection of circumstances today. Then, where you have, I don't understand it fully because it's very complex, but the war in Ukraine. You have a lot of families. Like, I'm working with a couple of people in the library I work in, and their loyalties are to different sides of that conflict, and an awful lot of them are from families from both sides. Do you know what I mean? Like, the dad might be Russian, the mum might be Ukrainian, vice versa. They may speak Russian, they may speak Ukrainian, etc. And they all have a different view of who they want to win, and that has even changed with some of them since the war began. So in a way, in a strange kind of way, 40 years later, not only was the timing kind of amazing that the book has come out now, thanks to Bridget, but also just the issues that he's raising in it about identity and about, I feel fully Irish kind of thing, but I know there's all these different strands inside. And I suppose back when he wrote that book, people wouldn't discuss even about, that a person could be, have one person in the British Army and will make money, and then, in fact, an area down, I'll finish up now, but an area down the road from me, the Claddagh in Galway, fishing village, very traditional village, where they spoke Irish until very recently because people, they were fishermen and transporting turf and food, etc. out between Connemara and Galway. So the Irish language lasted a long time in that village, which is right in the middle of Galway city. But actually, there were a huge amount of families who were reliant on either the widow's pension or the pension from, the salary that was sent home from. So, but as soon as Ireland got independence, all those families were overnight. They were nationalists. Do you know what I mean? As nationalists as you can get. Do you know what I mean? So there's hidden layers with everybody, you know, and a lot depends on just trying to survive, doesn't it? In life, I suppose. So, so it's a lovely coincidence that it's 40 years later. I suppose what I thought was amazing about the book as well is there's such a poetic language in the book. Like he's just a poet, really, you know, and to be able to put that into a child's voice, like that's extremely difficult, I think. Do you know what I mean? It's an achievement in itself. And the other thing as well is it's very visual, the story, you know. I'll just read one quick excerpt before I blather on too much here now. But in this scene here, there's okay, tá cinál going battle ar siúil idir Republicans agus Free Staters last month in Chach. Basically their house is kind of, it's in the middle of Ballinasloe, big town, and the family are up in bed, and there's bullets whizzing over and back between the two sides, and unfortunately they're kind of in the middle, and the dad sort of has a flashback then. He's obviously slightly shell-shocked from being in the war, as a lot of people were, and probably was never 100% right afterwards, but and again, that was another thing that people didn't speak about a whole lot either, was, you know, what happened to the legacy of violence, etc. You know, a great wind rising up and the house reeling in the night, the slates rattle overhead and he wakes, pain in his right hand bent beneath him, dust in his nose. He's lost in himself, engulfed by the darkness. His father's muscular arms lifting him from the bed, and a barefoot foray here and there across the floor, and his mother's voice saying Virgin Mary over and over like big iron pots striking a rock, rending the night outside. His father ordering everyone in military fashion, saying, Olivia, for God's sake, all of them into the old pair's room, because of the ceiling. A candle flame leaping in the darkness, his mother's face in the gloom rigid with fear. She was half naked, heat rising steam-like between her breasts. Good heavens, woman, are you out of your mind? His father quenched the candle with a blow of his fist. A thud, thud, thud from the wall, the tinkle of broken glass against the windowsill. He was spouting orders tersely. Get down, for God's sake, get down, start crawling. He was out in the Great War and knew all about this. Pure misfortune and the bloody guts inside below. There was a small red lamp on the altar in the old pair's room. A little bright circle on the ceiling above, flicker between the lamp and the circle of light, with every thud that sounded through the house. The red colour of everything in the twilight, especially his granny's nightdress sitting in the bed she was, rosary beads in her hands. He found it strange, her grey hair hanging in two plaits like a girl. In with his mother, with only a short shirt on top, something he'd never seen before. He couldn't believe it. Spectral night, a dark smudge of hair exposed. Effie the waif, and she carrying Charlottine in her arms, Tommy holding onto the tail of her shirt whinging. His father shouted at her to crawl. He already lay stretched out on the ground, his nightshirt down to his calves, hat on his head. He organised them all, lying face down along the bottom of the wall. 303, he says, ricochets, grenades, he says, fragmentation, get up, he says to the old pair, turn off that damn lamp. A bed as high as the kitchen table, a weight of coats and coloured rags, the smell of age off them. He was always reluctant to enter the half-light of this room. This is the granny's grandparents' room. His grandfather stretched out like a giant skeleton, his big bald head in the pillow, egg-skull, that swarthy, eyeless head of his peering up at him from the gravel, the day himself and Monkey Dowling escaped to the sand pit looking for swallows' nests. The ground falling, a layer of gravel and clay tumbling down, the skeleton that revealed itself. No rosary, a Protestant, grey hair on the breast. They were rich long ago, his grandmother told him, in a city on a rock across the sea far away. She said, to hell with fragmentation. Down on your two knees you should be Tommy Winders, saying your prayers. His father said that this tack was the right one in its place. But this was a war that was going on outside, a bloody war. He gave a whistle of breath and quenched the lamp. The image stayed beneath his eyelids, within his memory, the bare skull on the red pillows. The years and the years, the whistling in his ears. The whistling breath of the old man, the whistling of the ricochets, the clattering on the roof, on the plaster, on the bones of his memory. I'll just go on a bit here now. Mice skittering in the timbers of the wall next to his ear. He remembered that big word, fragmentation. Bits of mortar falling down on the street outside. Smithereens is what his grandmother said, a country word. She had words like that mixed to her speech, Irish smithereens, that always brought an affectionate smile from beneath the white moustache of his grandfather. He sported a big silk necktie like one of the gentry beneath his chin in the picture. Smithereens, glass falling, fragmentation. The word had a flavour to it. It was in the story that the nun had told, 12 baskets of fragments, torn clothing, the streets being smashed around him, fragmentation. He loved joining the word to the thing. You heard the roof slates falling in the word. Listen, blessed art thou amongst women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb. Up from the child sucking. Here you go, Olivia, we'll truss them all up. Yeah, comrades, you're all as cosy now as the wrens in the nest. The second mystery of the most holy rosary. For God's glory and Ireland's honour. Oh no, 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 duckings, no, no, no. His whole life broken in smithereens behind his eyelids. Safe and sound in his mother's warmth, in a boat swimming. The incredible depth, the dark river beneath him, the depth of voices, one voice after another revealing itself. Their faces blurred, faceless forms revealing themselves in the forest. A story with no words, like a great book being read far away and beyond his hearing. Okay, I'll just go on a bit now. Awake, a silence beyond measure. Then the sounds of movement in the house next door. The Dowlings were pulling heavy furniture across the floor. The father had decided to move the clothes press to cover the window with it. Ricochets, he says, and began whistling. Deutschland über alles between his teeth. Get up, comrade, hurry, give me a helping hand. He was ready to free himself from the warm mass of his mother's body when the floor jumped up beneath him. It wasn't a noise exactly, but more like a great whoosh of wind sucked in through the window. A momentary glare of brightness cut through the room. The old woman sat up stiffly in the bed, her plaits down to her shoulders like a girl in the stories who'd magically turned old. Her head laid against the old man's face, his father's small bird eyes peering out from under the edge of his hat, his lips murmuring the words, Christ, shell, the bloody bazooka, the whole ceiling pouring down on top of them, as if in slow motion. The whisper itself disappeared in his ear. Well done.